The funding winter or a sharp crunch in seed capital for startups has been an issue for a while. Now the Karnataka government's mid-year fiscal report quantifies how bad the situation is. Yesterday in the state legislature, it records an 80% drop in seed capital for startups and a 46% drop in FDI investments into the state, largely driven by the global economic situation. The drop in FDI is directly related to drop in investments into the IT services and software sector, nearly 60% drop there. Nearly 40,000 jobs lost since the start of the funding crunch across the country, and that's a concern for the startup capital Bengaluru. Nationally, there's been a 70% dip in seed capital for startups, and this is a 5-year low in terms of inflows. Interestingly, while FDI and global funds are a concern for the startup industry, capex of top Indian companies is on an all-time high. 118 of the top 150 crossed the US dollar 80 billion mark in terms of capital expenditure. A special set of prominent industry voices and startup voices from Bengaluru with us this evening to understand those numbers, starting with Madan Padaki, entrepreneur and president of TiE Bengaluru. Madan, thanks so much for speaking to us. You're speaking to us from Belgaum. Help us make sense of the numbers. I mean, we all knew that there was a funding crunch or winter. Is it getting colder, or do you see a silver lining?
I definitely see a silver lining, and I think, the startup activity and the ecosystem is still very vibrant, thriving. I'm here in Belgavi today for a startup conference, and the number of startups in AI, cybersecurity, drones, solving some really, wonderful problems. There's so much of enthusiasm here. Having said that, I also, of course, the numbers have dipped. There is much more realism and reality that's set in. But I don't see a dip in, it is getting, of course, harder to raise capital for at the seed stage and at the growth stage as well. But I don't see that being impactful on the startups in any which way, because the enthusiasm I see is still the same. And that's an interesting thing to note here, Virago.
As you make that point, Madan, the psychological impact of this downturn startup ecosystem is built, remember, on the risk-taking approach. As you know, there was a huge abundance of funds to take those risks and throw around till the crunch started, but that luxury is gone now.
Sure. I would look at it in another way, that people and startups are being far more circumspect about their problem they're solving, the market fit that they're trying to get. Earlier, you could just go out to the PPT with some MVP and you could raise money. Now there are more harder questions being asked, which I think is good for the ecosystem, because then you're building something which is of value, right? So the conversations I've been having with startups here is, how do you generate revenues? What is profitability? Who are the paying customers? And that's taking precedence over where do I raise capital.
Right. Every downturn, has a lesson, right? What's it here? I mean, is it the over-dependence on foreign capital? Lesson there to reorient towards Indian money?
100%. I think that is the biggest takeaway from this situation that we are in. I think a large number of investors, Indian money has to step in as foreign money steps out. In fact, one of the objectives of today's meeting here in Belgavi was to encourage local angel investors to step in. And we announced a cluster seed fund of 25 crores along with the Karnataka Digital Economy Mission, of which 1/3 coming from the government, 1/3 coming from financial institutions, and 1/3 coming from local investors. Of the 1/3 from local investors, half of it has already got subscribed today. Right? So I think this gives us a lever to go to the smaller towns, to go to the emerging clusters and say, listen, there is an opportunity for the long term. Come in with your capital, help work with startups and build local thriving ecosystems. And I think that's the silver lining that we should build and make it bigger.
Thanks very much, Madan, for speaking to us, articulate as ever.